China Uber Alles is brought to you in part by Sushi Market Sprouts on 7th in Santa Cruz and Kaito, coming soon to the Capitola Mall food court. Treat yourself to the finest Japanese cuisine you'll find anywhere with fresh sushi to go and delicious ramen dinners. Sushi Market Sprouts and Kaito. Yum! Hello, welcome to another edition of China Uber Alles. I'm Bill Graff, along with Nan Su, a senior reporter from the Epoch Times, and Amy Howe, a survivor of the re-education camps of the Cultural Revolution in China under Chairman Mao. We have a great show for you today. We want to we have the great fortune to have both Nan and Amy in the studio with us this week. Welcome to both of you. Hi.
Hi.
Hello, everyone. We're going to have a very exciting program. We have a special guest. I'm not sure if you heard of the host of the program, Crossroad at Epoch Times. And he is joining us today. Because he's visiting Northern California, so he's joining us today in our show as our special guest. And guess what? We're going to talk about the break-in. I mean, the Chinese Communist Party in Hong Kong actually just broke in to Epoch Times printing shop.
And did some big-time damage.
A big-time damage. So Epoch Times right now, it's not able to print any paper in Hong Kong. It's one of the only two independent newspaper. One is called Epoch Times, another one is Apple Daily. I'm not sure if you remember the CEO of Apple Daily, Jimmy Lai, who has already been arrested. So now, no independent newspaper right now in Hong Kong get published. So we're going to talk about that, and of course, before we jump into that subject, we're going to have our usual segment, Amy Howe's story. Amy spent more than a decade of time in re-education camp because of Cultural Revolution under Chairman Mao. So Amy, what are you going to tell us today?
I'm going to continue my story from last week, so refresh everybody's memory. And I was talking about during the Cultural Revolution, and that time I was 14, and they started this big series, revolutionary series. That means the red guard and the students they can get a free ride by the train and traveling the country to spread the revolution everywhere. China is a big country, So I was talking about how difficult, how crazy, and all the kids, and to rush to Beijing to see Mao, because Mao have this rally, and to talk to just want to promote his revolution. So anyway, I got Beijing finally, but the rally is over. That's winter time in December. And I spent about 51 days in Beijing. Even very cold place, but they, still have a lots of history in those architecture, because Beijing is capital of the China, forbidden cities, everything. Doesn't matter. Summer palace, even in winter, is still very fascinating.
Oh, where did you stay?
I stay with my cousin. Finally, my distant cousin, actually, cousin's cousin coming to Shanghai. And so I begged them to take me to Beijing. So she said, okay. So she took me. She's 5 years older than me.
But I thought that most of the students who went to Beijing to see Chairman Mao, they stay in school campus.
Yes,
right?
school campus. But that time, rally already over.
Okay.
It's a summertime, I think in August they started this rally. And I think it's 8 times Mao was received those people. But that time, December is over. Also very, very cold in Beijing, freezing. And then, so I stay in my cousin's house. They are very intellectual family, and have professors in Beijing University. And also, this uncle is the one translated those Buddhist and stuff to English, because he was learning English in Shanghai.
Oh, he was translating Buddhist script to English.
To English.
Wow.
Published, so very important person. That's why the whole family from Yunnan, they original was Yunnan. England, born in England. They moved to Beijing. And by that time it was horrible. They have a little good courtyard, have a 4 sections, but the red guy come in and took over. So the whole family all stick in one room. The parents, the brothers, everybody, just one room. And I don't know, no, I'm from southern China, Shanghai, and in northern China, because at the night it was so cold. So they use those brick bed. Mm-hmm. So one brick bed, so everybody sleeping. And then
it's a very, very long bed.
To stay warm.
Yeah. No. Underneath they use the straw and to make the heat.
Oh, I see.
So
it's a heated.
But
you
burn,
to
me, it's,
you burn wood wherever.
Yeah, but I just not get used to it, like you were barbecued. But I'm not kidding you. It's so hot, Anyway, but and so dry, so can't have to drink water, So not very difficult for me, from southern China, Shanghai. So anyway, that time I met my pen pal. He is also from Yunnan. He was the cousin's best friend. So he also coming in December to visit Beijing. So we forming a group and together the family and then this guy, and then we go to Great Wall, even in that difficult time, But we still took a train, get there. That time is no tourism business, You had to really climbing so we did. They come back. And everybody make a point because they are very intellectual people, even during Cultural Revolution, and so depressed, they're being tortured, everything, but they're still writing a poem. But you had to express yourself somehow, privately. So we had the stove in the center, so everybody, I don't know how to write, so that time they teach me how to do that. So I developed my interest in the Chinese traditional culture. Those are all classic poems. So I'm learning a lot. So also daytime, we just go different places. They tell me the story, the history, and those places. So 51 days just passed by so fast. So then today I want to talk about, since I met the guy, he's a director of the Yunnan Opera. Because China is a big country. So they have a Beijing opera. They're singing in the Beijing dialogue. And it's the official operas. But locally, each province, they have their own dialogue opera. So Yunnan language is a little bit like a Beijing, because lots of people original from Beijing, the northern province, but they just add some local dialects. So anyway, and so he's teaching me how to write a poem, and then he was giving me lots of compliments. He said that you are little sister, he called me. Little sister, he said that you have something, so you eventually, what do you want to be? I said, I want to be a writer. He said, that's great, I think, but now, during the Cultural Revolution, and you cannot do anything, you cannot write anything freely, and will be bigger trouble. So anyway, and he went back to Yunnan and write back to me about the Yunnan, how beautiful the place, because Yunnan province is really very far away from Beijing, but they have all the minorities live there. So it's very exotic place. And also the mountains and the rivers, everything just beautiful. He wrote a lot of poems about that, keep on telling me that. So the reason I want to go to the labor camp, they have a choice, 6 places, so I choose Yunnan because of that influence. So today I want to talk about is this guy, his name is Li, and his fiancée is Mei, and their love story during the Cultural Revolution. I write about it the beginning because I was so inspired by the love, everything. So it called the Red Camellia. Camellia is the flower. That flower is camellia. Is flower is the Yunnan is very beautiful, like a February and March with blossom all over the place. They have one camellia tree with 1,000 years. So it's like a UNESCO treasure for China. You know, they protected. I don't know now still exists or they died or whatever. So eventually this happy story, red camellia become a withered camellia, died. So that's the story I want to talk about. So on the March 2nd, 1969, so finally I arrived in Yunnan. So before that, I wrote it to my pen pal. I said, I go to Yunnan, but there is no response. But I tell the letter, I say I had to arrive March, take 4 days, 3 nights, and to get there. So I tell the date. And then finally I received, before I leaving, I received a letter, but not from him, and from somebody's name, May. So, you know, the May is usually the flower May, you know, May flower in China, but this May is the eyebrow May. So I don't know is a guy or girl. I had no idea. So I write her back. I say the biggest brother or sister, because she didn't introduce herself, you know, the relationship with Lee. She just said that I'm going to be there. I'm looking for you when you arrive in the train station. But I said, I don't even know it's a guy, it's a girl or boy. So I write her back. And she write it back to me, and she says she's a fiance of Lee. You know, so I got there, you know, just amazing. I come out that they have this welcome ceremony, you know, the revolution kind of. And I saw a girl, very pretty girl, very outstanding, beautiful, and standing there and wear the red, you know, the armband. Mm-hmm. And because that means they are called the revolutionary rebelling group, because they are in power. And she will wave it to me. I said, how do you know it's me? I will never exchanging picture or anything, right? He said, because I saw somebody looking, so you must looking for me. So bingo, really. So I like her, and she liked me. And then she said, I said, what's happened to Lee? He said, I cannot tell you now. He said, on the way, he said, I will take you to my home, and my mother's there. So then we have a supper, and I'll tell you the story. So she got me to her home. I think her father is a professor at the Yunnan University, also the dean. This college, I mean, technician college or whatever. And he was 30 years old, he became an economy professor, her father. And somehow in Cultural Revolution, and the red guy beat him to death. And so I left her mother and May. And so mother speak, because they all original from Shanghai. So we speak same dialogue. It's like at home. So she cooked some Shanghainese food for me, so I feel like at home. So, but she still didn't tell me what's happened to Lee. So I said, you got to tell me what's happened to him. And he said that somehow he becoming head of a conservative group. In China Cultural Revolution, Mao wanted people fight each other. So they created this rebelling group to fight with a conservative group. Somewhere in Sichuan, they even kill lots of people. They just they have those weapon factory. So they have 2 groups. What do you think? Everybody have weapons, so shoot each other to kill lots of people, right? So they locked him into put in jail, and it's actually it's not real government jail. It's like they set up something, you know, just put him there, torture him, everything. So I said, for what? And he said that they just, because the rebelling group on power, so they want the revenge. I said, what did he do to the rebelling group? He said, no, he didn't do anything, but they think he's the head of a conservative group, so he had to, you know, has to be crucified. So that's the story. And then I say, how do you become a rebelling group? He said, yeah, because we are in different universities. He said, Lee was 6 years older than me. He said, I have two brothers, but they joined the Liberation Army during the Korea War. Two brothers much older than her. She's much younger. So Lee treated her is like a little sister, 6 years older than her. So eventually they fall in love, and so they engaged, but they didn't get married yet. And just about a couple of 1 week ago, and they decided to get married, but they arrested Lee and put him in jail. So never get the certificate, you know.
You mean the marriage certificate?
Marriage certificate, yeah. So, so she told me that, but she showed me all the letters, and I remember one was talking about their great love, and he said that like swimming, maybe you don't see the shoreline, but that you never will lost your confidence to get there or something. So that means suddenly they will get together, and she always managed the way and to see him, and so he wrote back because he's a writer, so it's beautiful love letter, everything. She showed it to me, everything. So it's a fantastic love story, really inspired me. I said, well, even during the Cultural Revolution, and have such a love story is really great. Those you only read from those classic novels.
Yeah.
So,
exactly.
So I really was appreciate that, and she told me everything. So I really hoping, finally they can get together, go through this. So, but real life is never is a movie or book. So I probably won't talk next time. I think
she stopped right in the good part.
Okay.
Every time, Amy stops in the good part.
Okay,
right.
We'll learn the result of their love next program, next week.
All right, sounds good. All right, so we want to remind folks that we actually got some good news while Amy was telling her story. We thought we were only going to have Josh for the first hour of our program today, but as it turns out, Josh Philipp, investigative reporter for the Epoch Times, will be with us for the entire program today. So that's great. I guess he got a schedule change at the last minute, so that's good. He is an investigative reporter with the Epoch Times, and we're going to talk about the situation in Hong Kong to provide a perspective on what might be done to support democracy in China's sphere of influence. We have we have a situation in this world now where China is trying to influence other countries in various places. I read an article about China's influence in the Philippines, and the Philippines is apparently now starting to push back. They don't want to have the influence that China has presently in the Philippines. President Duterte in the Philippines is pushing back against China's government, which I found somewhat interesting, considering China's power and wealth and the Philippines' current situation. It just seemed a little...
Well, I think mainly it's really because of the how we going to think of the threat from China, from the entire Western world. If the United States and the Western world really start pushing back and trying to defend the security and safety of the Western world as well as the United States, then we're going to see a lot of countries following this.
All right, so I think probably the best person to talk about Joshua's biography and whatnot is you, because you two work for the same company.
Yes.
And you know a lot about Joshua, so why don't you go ahead and introduce him?
Well, actually, Josh was actually from California.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He grew up in San Diego. And he is my friend, and he's a long-time investigative reporter for the Epoch Times. He's right now the host of a very famous and popular program, Crossroad. So if you never heard of it, I will encourage you to log on to Google. Just Google Crossroad Epoch Times, and you're going to see him. And he's there talking about issues. His expertise area is communism, socialism, as well as CCP's penetration into the Western world. So, hey, welcome, Josh, to our program today.
Hey, it's a real pleasure being here, Sunan. Thank you.
All right. I have two co-hosts, Billy and Amy. Hey, both of you say hello to...
Hi, Josh. I remember last year, your documentary about the Wuhan virus. So I think Michael interviewed you on the Saturday.
That's right.
Special, yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny with that because, of course, Facebook said it was fake, but all the reports that came out after have actually verified our findings. But I'm glad to see someone remembers that. Yeah.
Yeah. Welcome back.
Yeah, welcome to our program. I'm fascinated to find out what your take is right now on how China is trying to affect its influence and change its image around the world. It's just amazing to me.
So, Josh, let's start.
Big story, yeah.
Yes, let's start talking about the attack the CCP launched against the Epoch Times in Hong Kong. Tell us what happened. That was just like 3 days ago, right?
Yeah. So four men, forced their way into our printing, the building that holds our printing presses. They had sledgehammers. They verbally threatened the person who was at the door, our staff member. They also had a knife, but they did not use it. But they used these sledgehammers to then go in and smash our printing equipment. And then they had a bag of debris, which they used to then spread over all the conveyor belts and everything for the printing press. And so, I mean, it obviously premeditated. They came in there with all the equipment, including the debris, with the intention of doing exactly what they did, which was preventing us from printing our newspaper in Hong Kong.
Now, how many editions did it affect?
Well, that affects our Hong Kong office. So we're, of course, blacklisted in mainland China, as I think most people would imagine. But we do have publications, print editions in both Taiwan and in Hong Kong. And this one disabled our Hong Kong printing.
By now?
Last I heard, it was still disabled. I mean, they really smashed up the equipment pretty badly.
For how many days now?
It's been about 4 days. It's been about 4 days. But, this is a trend. They did the same thing, I think it was last year during the Hong Kong protests. Same incident. Several men forced their way into the printing press building and then set on fire the printing press.
Wow.
They came with gasoline, set it on fire, and I think it cost like $40,000 in damage and also put us out of operation there for a bit.
Wow.
Now, this attack didn't affect any of your online information, did it?
No, this did not affect our online news. This did not affect our online news at all, just the printing press. But, I mean, it's kind of a concerning development in what we think may become a new trend. Really, there are only two newspapers in Hong Kong that the Chinese Communist Party can't really control. One of them is Epoch Times. The other one is, I believe, Apple Daily. And they've been going after both of us in Hong Kong ever since the Chinese Communist Party ended Hong Kong's autonomy. We've been seeing this development.
So what's the reaction from the Hong Kong government or police?
Well, I mean, the problem you have in Hong Kong now is that Hong Kong is no longer an independent system. Remember last year we had the Hong Kong democracy protest. There were, up to 2 million people, I believe, out of the streets protesting. And that's a good percentage of the Hong Kong population. They were out there protesting, calling against the Chinese Communist Party's plans to work with the Hong Kong government to have it so people could face charges, be extradited to mainland China if they face criminal charges. In light of the protests, the CCP just kind of took off the mask. The Chinese Communist Party took off the mask, and what they did was basically ended Hong Kong's autonomy. Hong Kong was supposed to be relatively self-governing, the idea was one country, two systems. It's under the Chinese Communist Party technically, but they have rule of law, they have democracy, they have the systems of legal protections and so on that Western countries would expect. The CCP stepped in and said, not anymore, you're fully under the Communist Party now. And this is just the trajectory of where it's been going.
Yeah. Hey, Josh, do you think in the future Epoch Times can still publish its publication, and for how long? Are you optimistic about that?
I'm relatively optimistic. Our Hong Kong staff, they came out and made public statements, and they said that they're not going to fold. They're not going to give in. They're not going to give up. They're going to keep printing the paper. They're going to keep doing what they're doing, regardless of the pressure they get. And these are people facing threats. These are people facing attacks. These are people facing the arm, not just the arm of the Chinese Communist Party. And remember Joshua Wong, one of the main leaders of the democracy protests. I believe they just sentenced him to like 17 months in prison. They're facing that just for criticizing the Chinese Communist Party right now, or calling out its human rights abuses, or calling for democracy right now. All these are criminal charges in Hong Kong now. Not only are they doing that, but they're also risking the Chinese mafia, which the CCP, Chinese Communist Party, often uses as its strong arm. And really this type of behavior we see in Hong Kong, individuals coming in and just ransacking a place. This is not unusual with the kind of strong arm tactics that the CCP will use in cases like this.
Let me ask a question that, look, sometimes I ask questions because I just don't know anything about it. Under the new system, the new situation in Hong Kong, is it possible for the Epoch Times to employ its own security to protect the printing press facility? I mean, is that allowed by law?
From what I understand, no. From what I understand, that'd be playing with fire, let's put it that way. And you can only have so much protection anyways in places like that. From what I understand, it's not really an option, but maybe Nan-Su can correct me if I'm wrong. From what I understand, it's not really an option there.
No, I don't see it's actually possible if they you have to register all your whatever you try to hire, right? If they don't allow you to do that.
So Josh, so probably you know a lot about their judicial system. So they still use the British system, or they completely become a CCP, China's system?
From what I understand, they can maintain the facade of having the British system, but it's really the Communist Party system in place now. What they did was they brought in mainland judges, last reports I heard, and had them take over. And they also have it now so that Hong Kong has to enforce the Chinese Communist Party's national security laws. Wow. And so they can claim that they have rule of law, but they're enforcing the Chinese Communist Party's versions of law, which outlaw things like, say, political speech, which outlaw things like calling for democracy, which outlaw anything that would call into question the legitimacy of the Chinese Communist Party, and outlaws anything that the CCP regards as a threat, which is, really they're a one-party system, right? Any kind of talk of politics or people wanting to get involved in political discussion or debate is not really allowed in mainland China because they say it's none of your business. Politics is not the business of the citizen as far as they're concerned. They control it all.
So one more question. So in your opinion, in the future, you think Hong Kong still have a hope to remain a freedom of speech?
Well, it's walking a line. Let's put it that way. I have mixed feelings about it. Part of me thinks yes. Part of me thinks no. The part of me that thinks yes says that as long as people are willing to speak out, as long as people are willing to step forward, as long as people are willing to go out and protest, if they believe that the CCP is stepping over the line, then yes, they can maintain it. But if people go quiet, if people start folding, if people start wanting to keep their heads down, then no, they're going to lose their freedoms. It's the kind of issue where people need to almost be willing to be persecuted in order to keep their rights. And if they fold, and especially if the international community doesn't criticize the CCP for this, this is just going to be the beginning of it.
I don't think
you have two factors. Yeah,
Josh, I don't think there's a danger of the outside world stopping criticism of China at this point. I think they're on everybody's radar right now. At least that's my opinion. Let me ask you this: can Taiwan pick up the slack of the printing, and can those publications get into Hong Kong somehow?
Well, Hong Kong, we can still print in we could still print in Taiwan. Shipping it into Hong Kong might even be more controversial, because then they're talking about, foreign influence and foreign infiltration, and they could pull all kinds of narratives from it. It would actually be a lot more controversial over that to happen, rather than saying we're printing it in Hong Kong. This is a Hong Kong newspaper.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I have one other question I want to ask, because I'm a radio guy for 43 years, I've been doing this. Could not the Times set up their version of Radio Free Europe for Hong Kong? I mean, is it possible to beam the radio in from somewhere where they don't know where it's coming from?
There are groups that do that. Epoch Times, and I don't think we do anything like that currently, but it is an option. Actually, there is circumvention software people use even in mainland China to get around the Great Firewall, which is the system of internet censorship they use in mainland China. And as they begin censoring even in Hong Kong using the same methods, people in China have ways of getting around it. People in China have ways of getting information from outside of mainland China. And so it is possible. There's already technologies for it.
So right now, their internet censored in Hong Kong.
Yes.
Before was you can
Free.
do anything. Yeah.
Censored and monitored.
Wow.
And so the censorship is not as heavy-handed there yet, but yes, there are elements of it already, and especially the monitoring is an issue where they're trying to track down democracy protesters.
Yeah, the IP addresses.
Who was on the streets and so on. Yeah.
Hey Josh, I remember just I think that was back in 2019 during the democracy protest in Hong Kong. I saw one of the reporters of Epoch Time newspaper standing right on the street, and one of her report was when she tried to cover the democracy protest. One of her report was, I remember clearly, that ever since Hong Kong was taken back by CCP from British government, Hong Kong's police authority has been sending all the new police officers to mainland China under CCP's control to receive their training, and they were forced to do a lot of political studies, basically. They're like a brainwash, that kind of thing. So from your standpoint, based on your understanding, how bad is the Hong Kong government? I mean, it's supposed to be autonomous government, right? So how bad is that government actually penetrated and controlled by CCP?
It's fully under the control of the Chinese Communist Party now. Any official who was out protesting alongside the Hong Kong protesters they're also facing criminal charges. And so anybody who's not playing the game with the CCP, anyone who's not agreeing to push what the CCP wants, they're all under criminal investigation themselves. And so they're just in as much hot water as we are, just in as much hot water as all the other people who are facing charges right now, like Joshua Wong and others. And yeah, what you mentioned, the sending them back for training in mainland China, that's standard practice for the CCP. They do the same thing with media organizations. The state council runs those trainings for Chinese media. And, if you're not playing the game, you get attacked. And I think we're a good example of what happens when you don't play their game.
Joshua, when I was living overseas a number of decades ago now, Hong Kong was, as we all know, basically a free port. And there were lots of companies from around the world that did business with other companies in Hong Kong in a free trade kind of a situation. Now, of course, that's changed. The CCP has taken control of Hong Kong, the trading port and everything else. How does that affect any kind of trade that formerly took place in Hong Kong? Do other outside companies around the world, do they still trade in Hong Kong, or is that just done?
That's actually a great question. And I can tell you when the things first started up in Hong Kong, that was kind of the foundation of one of my biggest criticisms of why nothing would probably happen. Because a lot of the Chinese Communist Party used to use Hong Kong as a way to kind of launder money and get money out of China or make business deals and so on. They needed Hong Kong in terms of their financial and business manipulation. But what happened is the CCP, Xi Jinping leading it, set up Macau with basically those same types of trade benefits. And so while they were preparing for Hong Kong, they were establishing that same type of trade network through Macau. And that's just what they did with it.
So how is, wow, I have to ask a second question here. So Macau is famous for casinos and other stuff. How is it that Macau can get away in the Chinese government's eyes with free trade around the world, but yet they want to control Hong Kong? I don't understand the idea in the CCP's mind. I don't understand how is Macau different to the Chinese point of view than Hong Kong was. Hong Kong was already established.
The big difference is that the people in Hong Kong were on the streets protesting and were out criticizing the Chinese Communist Party. And so the CCP's biggest concern was that these protests were going to start spreading inside of China. Oh. And the history of this goes back to the Umbrella Revolution, where you had similar pro-democracy protests. You know, they weren't just calling for an end to the CCP's agreement to have an extradition treaty with Hong Kong, where they could basically enforce mainland law in Hong Kong. It started with that and ended with basically the people of Hong Kong seeing that they were going to lose their rights one way or the other if things were allowed to continue. The protest turned from just against that one law into a protest against the Communist Party itself. And that, for the CCP, you know, Hong Kong's one thing. But if those protests began spreading, if the people in mainland China saw that or talked to people there, which they were, that was their big concern, is that this was a protest that could spread, and it was one that targeted, you know, basically for the removal of the CCP itself.
So just a little bit background information to help answer Billy's question. I see Amy is eager to ask her next question now. Macau's situation is a little different. The major business of Macau is casino, right?
Right.
The casino business. There's one family, Hearst family, that controls probably. More than 80%, close to 90% of the casino business. That family is very pro-China, pro-CCP, very close relationship. So you don't really see a lot of a protest, all these things going on in Macau. And also, and one of the reasons that the business is so close to Beijing, it's also because a lot of gamblers are from China, and they are the officials. The officials, the corrupt officials, they bring a lot of corrupting money go there to.
What happens in Macau stays in Macau, right?
Same as Las Vegas.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, as long as the people don't go out to the street protest, they don't have problems. So Amy.
Yeah, Josh, have some question. Let's review a little bit the history about the Hong Kong. 1997. Hong Kong returned to China. So it's about 23 years. I think I still remember during that period, I visited Hong Kong different times. At the beginning, I think when the Hong Kong government, they pick up, the Tong family. Of course, they are also very close to the CCP. But at that time, I think China still have, they still poor. They need the Hong Kong money. It's more like they cannot say something, they say yes. It's kind of more collaboration, the effort between Hong Kong government and CCP, probably the beginning, and they promised 50 years Hong Kong not going to changing, so right? So anyway, and then later, I think mainland China heavily invested in those infrastructure in Hong Kong. So you see the dramatic changes when they took over. It's getting better, like a high-speed ferry and the tunnels, everything. I just said, wow, they spend that kind of money. But Josh, what is the turning point? And they were, of course, gradually they infiltrated to politically and economically. So when is the turning point? Is it after Jiang Zemin or during the Jiang Zemin time already start?
I'd say the turning point was from the very beginning. They've been talking about, overtaking Taiwan and Hong Kong from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
We actually did a short documentary on this called the CCP method, and this is just how they operate. It's the same method they use for the One Belt One Road initiative, where they go to different countries to get them into debt traps.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing. They make very nice sounding deals. They say, hey, we're going to build you a port. We're going to build you all this infrastructure. We can build your internet infrastructure. It's fantastic. Look at the benefits we can bring you.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens? Sure enough, they can't pay off the debts. Sure enough, when they go in and make the deals, they bring along, let's say they come with $10 million. $1 million is just for bribes. They bribe the key people, get them on the side of the
Mm-hmm.
Communist Party. They begin infiltrating the system. And then 5-10 years down the line, they look to control not just the things that they built, but they look to control the entire society.
Mm-hmm.
And, in Sri Lanka, for example, the government there was waking up to this. And they made a really interesting statement. They said, we're going to wake up one day and find ourselves a vassal state of China. And this is just what they do. This is how the CCP operates.
Now, Josh, Hong Kong's this so-called one country with two political system was supposedly set up to solve the problem for Beijing's leader. In their own words, it's the way to unify Taiwan, right? But now with this system totally go broke. What do you think about the security of Taiwan? Is that put Taiwan in a much more dangerous position?
Taiwan is in a much more dangerous position from many different standpoints. Now keep in mind the history of this is that around the time that the CCP overtook Hong Kong, just last year-ish, at the same time, you have the you have the Taiwanese presidential elections, and the Kuomintang, which used to be the anti-CCP party, is now the pro-CCP party. They lost their election. The party that is more anti-communist party won. And the CCP has a lot of influence in Taiwan using some of the same types of networks that they have in Hong Kong. Even at the time when you mentioned Hong Kong was brought into the fold, so to speak, of the CCP, they had, I've heard estimates of upward hundreds of thousands of agents working there, trying to stir things up on the ground. It was a big focus for the CCP. Mm-hmm. Same thing in Taiwan. They have very active groups through things like the United Front that work on subverting society, playing up the media, getting the key influencers there, speaking and promoting the CCP and trying to work from the inside. Now, in Taiwan, they became privy to that, and they actually banned the United Front Work Department's operations. And so that type of internal system to subvert the society has been somewhat dismantled to an extent in Taiwan. At the very least, people are aware of it. And now the CCP is talking about moving forward with plans of forcefully taking Taiwan. And we're now dealing with the issue where even the Biden administration is talking about what do we do? They're talking about continuing to help Taiwan defend itself. And the big question is, would the U.S. actually intervene militarily, not just help them defend themselves, but go into the conflict ourselves, or something to happen? And that's where the whole debate is now with Taiwan.
Let me ask you a question about Taiwan. A number of years ago, I know from personal experience that Taiwan was very tourism friendly. A lot of folks went to Taiwan on vacation. My own parents did. Took my sister to Taiwan, and they spent 3 weeks exploring that area of the world. Does Taiwan still promote tourism to the rest of the world other than China?
Oh yeah. Taiwan has great tourism. I mean, I see their ads all the time. Actually, they're very active on it. And keep in mind too, they used to be seen as the government in exile of China. it was only the UN that really changed that. Then the U.S. followed later. They were seen as the government in exile of China. The CCP was seen as the illegitimate government. But Taiwan has its own unique culture. It was the island of Formosa. They've been under Japanese rule. They've been under Chinese rule. It's gone back and forth. They have a culture very similar to Hawaii in some regards. They have the Maori people. In fact, allegedly some of the same background races. You know, I'm part Hawaiian, and so I do appreciate that quite a bit. And, yeah, it's a wonderful place.
Interesting.
Yeah, but
I wonder if the United States and China are going to square off over the subject of Taiwan.
They might. And in fact, it's nice to see the Biden administration is really continuing what the Trump administration started moving forward with reopening U.S. arms sales to Taiwan, opening up diplomacy with Taiwan. That was a real controversial move for the CCP. They were really unhappy when they started doing that. The Biden administration does have people now working on increasing diplomacy with Taiwan. The CCP is saying that they're regarding it as war planning. They're calling it combat drills when the U.S. is having diplomatic meetings with Taiwan right now. And so they are doing it. The problem you have with the U.S. right now, though, is that military analysis, they have these war games and so on. They're suggesting, at the very least the people running them are suggesting, that if the U.S. were to intervene militarily, that the U.S. is projected to lose because we don't have local bases to run our jets and so on, that we'd pretty much just be using our aircraft carriers, and they're projected to lose.
Well, we also have Okinawa.
We do, and there's also a chance that Japan could step in. Japan is actually stepping up to the plate quite a bit, which is very interesting to watch. And the CCP is also getting very hostile with India, and because they now have this Quad alliance between the U.S., Japan, India, and Australia, it is possible that alliance could deter the CCP, but it's not seeming like they're going to be deterred right about now. We'll have to see how it unfolds.
Hey, Josh, we are very close to our commercial break at the end of the hour, and also we are going to also have a news on the hour, so we're going to continue probably about 3:08 or something after the news on the hour and the traffic update, and we're going to open the calling and discussion, and then I know you make extra effort and cancel other appointments and to stay with us on the second hour. We really appreciate that. Again, to our audience, our special guest today is Joshua Phillips. He is a very popular program host on YouTube called Crossroad. If you are interested in his program, please just Google it, Crossroad, and you should be able to find his very popular program without any problem.
He's also a senior reporter for the
investigative reporter, long time
for the Epoch Times, and you can find his work all over the internet. Joshua, if you'll hang on, we're going to take our break and try to get to the news here in just a minute. We'll be right back on China Uber Alice. Fresh, prepared twice daily grab-and-go sushi you'll find waiting for you at Sushi Market Sprouts, 2 blocks from the beach at 300 7th Avenue in Santa Cruz. Fresh, delicious, and oh so good.
Hello, I'm Junko, and I look forward to serving you at the Sushi Market Sprouts.
It's springtime at your locally owned Ace Hardware stores in Santa Cruz. You probably know our stores on Almar and on Soquel Avenue, so we're proud to invite you to our brand new store at 201 Front Street. Twice as big, plenty of parking, and lots of new merchandise. Whether it's Steel and Ego outdoor power tools, grills from Weber, Traeger, and Big Green Egg, beach accessories and fishing gear, or garden soil and fertilizers, Ace is the place for spring. See you soon.
Hey, this is Dr. Duncan McCollum. Thanks a lot for tuning in. You know, you've heard me talk about this amazing new machine called the TRT machine, or the Tissue Regenerative Technology machine. We've had such amazing results, and I really want you to experience it. So I'm still offering the $49 special. I'm going to play a little snip from my friend and patient Noel. He's a diabetic patient. Listen to what he has to say about his treatment with the TRT machine.
You don't realize how much you use your toes for balance until there's no feeling in them. And so I've got the feeling back in my toes, and my balance is greatly improved. Definitely recommend it.
The tissue regenerative technology machine. I highly recommend you check it out. If you want to go to trtllc.com, you can find out about this. You definitely want to give it a try. Give our office a call, 459-9990, 831-459-9990.
KSCO has some of the most intelligent listeners on the planet, and most intelligent minds want to know, what are my options for taking Social Security benefits? Do I need an estate plan? When, where, and how do I enroll in Medicare? If you want answers to these and other hot financial topics, listen to Money Moves. Host Pamela Fugit-Hedrick and her guests have tips and tools you'll need so you can manage your money effectively. That's Money Moves, 7 p.m. Thursdays here on KSCO.
To protect his family from disaster, Steve used his camera phone.
Done.
By taking pictures of his important documents, Steve can always have them stored online. Learn more simple disaster prep tips at ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
User-Friendly Computing is Santa Cruz County's top-rated IT service and solutions provider since 1993. Here's why. Service and repair. Whether it's hardware, software, servers, or a workstation, we'll fix it or find you a new one. Managed services. Optimize and protect your infrastructure with 24/7, 365 proactive monitoring. Cloud solutions. Cloud IT is the future of small and medium business technology management. Website design. Engage customers and grow your business with tools to update your own content. Backup and recovery. Ensure business continuity with a comprehensive backup and disaster recovery plan. And finally, security and compliance. Advanced security systems help protect your data and keep your business up and running. There's only one place to go for all your computer and IT solutions, User-Friendly Computing, 505 River Street in Santa Cruz. Give Peter and his friendly staff a call at 831-423-9653. And be sure to tell them you heard about it on KSCO. We're coming to a close on the first hour of China Uber Alice for this Thursday. Our special guest from the Epoch Times, senior investigative reporter Joshua Phillips, will be with us for the second hour. We invite you to call in for questions. If you want to ask Joshua a question about the area, the region in general, or China, give us a call at 479-1080. We have a couple of callers who are waiting to do that now, and we will check in right after we bring you up to date. The latest in national and international news is on the way in just a moment, and then we'll check in for a quick look at traffic and weather locally and be back for the second hour of China Uber Alice. If you want to find out more about the program in general, go to our website, ChinaUberAlice.com. There's a lot of program information and show information there. Also, some background information on all of our guests, so check in there. I'm Bill Graff, along with Nan Su and Amy Howe and Joshua Phillips. We'll be right back after this news update on KSCO Santa Cruz.
And Madrone. There's an 8 to 10 minute delay through that stretch of slow-go traffic there. Your Central Coast forecast for the rest of this afternoon. Sunny skies, looking for a high of 67. Mostly clear tonight, then patchy fog. Overnight low of 43 degrees. Tomorrow, partly sunny skies, but we're looking for a high tomorrow, 68 degrees. Right now, outside the KSCO studios, it is 67 degrees. Now, stay tuned for the second hour of China Uber Alice, right here on KSCO.
China Uber Alice is brought to you in part by Sushi Market Sprouts on 7th in Santa Cruz and Kaito, coming soon to the Capitola Mall food court. Treat yourself to the finest Japanese cuisine you'll find anywhere with fresh sushi to go and delicious ramen dinners. Sushi Market Sprouts and Kaito. Yum! Boy, today's program is a real treat. Welcome to the second hour of China Uber Alice. I'm Bill Graff, along with Amy Howe and Nan Su. Our very special guest is the senior investigative reporter for the Epoch Times, He has been telling us all about what's going on in Hong Kong right now and Taiwan. We are talking to Joshua Philipp, the investigative reporter for the Epoch Times, who also has I guess it's a radio program or a television program?
It's a
podcast?
It's
all of those.
It's on YouTube. You can speak to him directly. And Joshua is the host of the program called Crossroad. Without space, just Crossroad, one word. You can you just type, you just Google it, Crossroad, and type also Epoch Times there. So there you go.
It'll pop right up.
Yeah, you'll pop right up.
Well, Joshua, thank you for holding on through the break. We know your time is precious, and you've made time in your schedule for us today. We have some folks who are going to call in and ask some questions. In fact, we've had a caller on the phone for quite a while holding on. We're gonna ask Wendy to ask you her question. Wendy, you're on China Uber Alice with Joshua. Amy? Wendy, are you there? Oh, I punched the wrong line. That's why that didn't work. Let me try this. We'll do it. No, I punched the right line. It's just not lit up. What happened?
I hear you.
There we go.
I hear you.
You're there. We hear you now, too.
Okay. Yeah, I checked out Joshua's page on YouTube, and it looks very good. I suggest it, definitely. And I wanted to bring out the idea of the language difference between mainland and Hong Kong, as well as what is usually spoken in the U.S., the traditional versus simplified. I ended up finding out about it when I was buying some art supplies, and I was buying from both China and Hong Kong, and using one of, a lot of the search engines will have a language translator. And they didn't know why I was using the wrong language when I was working with Hong Kong. Is that a big issue still in China?
I wouldn't say it's a big issue. China actually has a lot of different dialects. They do have a common written language, and then, of course, they have the new simplified version, which is a more recent thing, which is based on the more phonetic system of the West. I wouldn't say it's a big deal. China has always had many different dialects and languages.
Do you think they use Hong Kong because they have the more traditional, which is often spoken by expatriates in America?
No, I wouldn't say that's the reason for it. Again, China has many different dialects. Cantonese, of course, being one of the better known ones, and then the whole Han dialect, of course. I wouldn't say that that's really the cause of it. And they do have a shared written language, and so no matter what dialect you speak, actually the written language is shared across languages.
Oh, okay, thank you. Good luck with you. I've seen the Epoch Times for the digital on social media. It's often advertised, and I hope people get to you. And it sounds like you had a bodyguards and assassins episode going in there with them breaking up your press. That's a movie that I enjoy watching.
But wild times.
Very, very. Yeah, no, I've all this happened right before the Umbrella Revolution, and it's quite something. Yeah. Best of luck to you.
Wendy, thank you for the call. We appreciate it. Joshua, let me ask you a question. Getting back to the situation that the Times finds itself in Hong Kong right now, how long will it take the Times to reestablish the printing capability?
I'm not sure the exact timeline, but it shouldn't be too long. I'd imagine within maybe a week or a few weeks we should be back up. Hopefully very soon, but it depends on the repairmen, I assume. Yeah.
Is it difficult to get the printing press parts and whatnot into Hong Kong now with the Chinese government in control?
To be honest, I'm not sure. We're just now starting to kind of test the waters on it. It shouldn't be too difficult, but they damaged. They didn't just damage the, let's say, mechanical systems. They damaged the CPU. They destroyed the computers. And so fixing they smashed the computers to operate the whole thing. It's not just banging a metal piece back into place or something like that. It's really replacing some really sensitive parts. And so
Josh,
I'm not sure how difficult, but they are working on it.
So, Josh, as you know, that during the attacking, and they called the Hong Kong police.
They did call the Hong Kong police, and they are launching an investigation, and we'll have to see how that ends up going because, the world is watching, and we'll have to see how they end up playing it.
We have another call. Kenny is calling us from the city of Watsonville. Kenny, you're on China Uber Alice.
Good afternoon, lady and gentlemen. I have a question for Josh. Josh, would you be able to address what a war between Taiwan and mainland China would look like? I can't imagine them bombing Taiwan because they'd be destroying any value that was there to them. Would it just be an ocean war, or what would it look like?
Well, they would bomb Taiwan. Because it's more about ideology than it is about land and resources. But the Taiwanese government is a Western-style democratic system that doesn't have the type of absolute totalitarianism they have in mainland China. And they're really from the same basic culture, the same ethnic group as the mainland. And so Taiwan is a constant reminder to the Chinese people that if you had the same type of system we have in the West, the same types of freedoms we have in the West, that you would have not only a harmonious society, but a very wealthy, well-to-do society. It is a constant ideological blow to the CCP just by existing. And so they wouldn't hesitate to wipe Taiwan off the face of the earth if they could. And the Taiwanese military is talking about fighting to the last man if the CCP does invade. It would, of course, have Marines. It would be an island. It would be an island battle to start. Jets, naval ships, and then Marines moving into the Taiwanese mainland when you would have ground battles. As we speak, in fact, the U.S. Army is preparing for a possible what they call global land conflict with China as well. And so there is the possibility of foreign intervention, including land battles around the Chinese Communist Party. And so this isn't it's gone from the realm of political warfare and business warfare and things like this into very real possibilities of hot war.
Are there a lot of connections from Taiwan with the mainland, and is that why they feel threatened ideologically? Because there are people that live on Taiwan that still have direct connections with, being able to speak with and or visit with people on the mainland, and they're afraid that they're going to spread the freedom from Taiwan to the mainland?
I'd say not really, because you have that with just about every overseas Chinese community. Every Chinatown has people with family and friends back in China, and they often do keep in touch with each other. The Chinese community tends to be pretty close-knit, and the way the CCP tries to manage that is through the United Front Work Department. Typically, they'll run front operations, front businesses, and influence operations. They'll try to get the elite of a society, the journalists, the academics, the actors, the politicians in the pockets of the CCP, and they'll use them to try to promote the narratives of the CCP. Taiwan actually banned those types of operations, even though they do continue to some extent. And at the same time, remember that, again, Taiwan used to be the government in exile of China. And so there's a real ideological battle for legitimacy between the Chinese Communist Party and the government of Taiwan over which one actually represents China. Even though the CCP is now seen as the one representing China, they're worried that if Taiwan opens up diplomatically to the rest of the world, that it could regain that status as well.
Kenny,
thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Kenny, thanks for the call. We appreciate it.
You bet.
Let me ask a question based on what you just said, Joshua. Is there any movement at all to have Taiwan recognized in the United Nations?
There were pushes for it, especially in the past year, actually, which probably does lend to some things, to be honest. Remember what happened over the past year, especially when Trump was president. This really started again. Basically what happened is because of the virus, different leaders around the world were calling for investigations into the origin of the virus, Australia, Germany, other countries as well. the CCP began getting really hostile with different countries. Remember, they even put sanctions on Pompeo and other U.S. officials. In Australia, they were going after officials there, saying they were going to cut off their different financial incentives, cut off business, stop sending students there. They got in a border conflict with India, Japan, U.S., Australia. They formed this Quad alliance. Germany has begun doing freedom of navigation operations. India is really poised to become a regional leader outside of China for the Asia-Pacific region. I mean, things really started shifting. It's not just a U.S. issue. It's really other countries, independent of what the U.S. was doing, really started pushing back against the CCP. And amidst all of this, when the Chinese Communist Party was doing mask diplomacy, Taiwan was seen as one of the world leaders when it came to actually doing functioning mask diplomacy and really helping inform the world about the virus based on their data, because they, of course, had information on it as well.
Well, for quite a while, Taiwan had the best absolute record in containing the virus.
Yeah, they still do. And they didn't do the lockdowns or anything like that. I mean, not nearly as much as any other place. They really kept things pretty open, but they did really well with it.
Yeah, so far they only have 10 deaths.
Yeah,
because of COVID,
and like only 1,000 infections or something like that.
Yeah, they all live in high density, very crowded place.
But still,
it's unbelievable.
Yeah, unbelievable how well they did. Yeah. We have another call. Wants to talk to you, Joshua. This is Dan in Pacific Grove. Dan, you're on China Uber Alice.
Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, Joshua and everybody else there. I really appreciate the insights and information provided by both this radio show and Joshua Philipp and the Epoch Times, which I have an online subscription. When I want information, I really appreciate being able to access reality, and you all provide that. I have a question. It's come up in my mind. It's not based on evidence. I've not heard anybody bring this up. Maybe it's really strange, but I want to hear if you have any thoughts on it. Do you have any thoughts, conjecture, or information relating to any cooperative efforts between the government of the People's Republic of China and the drug cartels south of the border? It seems they're both very powerful and have some overlapping interests.
Yes, and in fact, I did several investigative stories on that, and my articles were actually cited in a few U.S. government reports on that during the Obama administration. So the Chinese Communist Party, its companies provide not just the synthetic drugs like fentanyl and stuff like that everyone talks about. They actually supply as well all the different precursor chemicals for drugs like methamphetamine and others. The Chinese Communist Party is feeding the drug crisis throughout most of Latin America and in the U.S. by providing not just the synthetic drugs again, but the ingredients for the other drugs. Also, the Chinese company, the arms manufacturer Norinco, supplies a lot of the weapons to the cartels throughout Latin America. I know the U.S. is oftentimes blamed for that. The analysis that the guns come from the U.S. is based on an analysis of one weapons cache. But really more, if you breathe into the defense community, most of it comes from Norinco and from China.
Wow.
At the same time, they do a lot of political influence, One Belt, One Road initiative, the triads, the Chinese mafia, they work very close with the cartels. The Chinese triads typically control the ports, and then from the ports work with the local underground cartels or other criminal organizations. The Chinese human smugglers, the snakeheads work very close. There's a handoff between them and the coyotes, the Latin American human traffickers. And so, yeah, across the board, there's cooperation.
Well, I appreciate that. I'll take one brief follow-up question, and I'll take a look for those articles. I haven't read everything you've put out. You're quite a busy man. Follow-up question to that or observation. It appears to me, let's just speak of the present, one could reasonably speculate that not everybody in our government is against the drug cartels and their associates, including the People's Republic of China. Because actions have consequences, and when predictable consequences happen from actions, that's called intentional in law. And you throw open the doors and say, come on in. And the Border Patrol has said, many times people in the Border Patrol says, hey, the drug cartels control much of what happens on the border. And they are vicious and have zero ethics, aside from success. And but I've not heard anybody say that, which perhaps suggests it's true. But the consequences of actions that are being taken sure do the cartels and anybody working with them a lot more benefit than it does us or those people, those individuals coming from Mexico, in most cases just wanting to go to work, but get sorely taken advantage of, if not murdered. So I'll sign off and continue to listen. I really appreciate what all of you are doing today.
Thank you for the question, Larry. We appreciate it.
Yeah, so I would recommend there's actually a book. It's hard to find in print, but you can find it online. It's called Red Cocaine by a man named Joseph Douglas, and it talks about how and why the drug wars were created under Mao Zedong against the United States and how they used Cuba and worked together with them to do these types of operations. They modeled they talk about it openly in their own war. You know, the Chinese Communist Party is ridiculously open with its plans for the U.S., what it's doing and why it's doing it. It's just nobody ever talks about it. They're totally open with this. They call it drug warfare. Mao Zedong modeled the drug warfare operations against the U.S. after the opium wars that the British were doing to China. And so this is warfare for them, and it is very well developed. And yes, the cartels are extremely violent, and yes, they terribly exploit and abuse people. And the government in a lot of the governments in Latin America, the military, the police, and the cartels tend to work hand in hand. And so it's hard to do diplomacy with these countries without at least turning a blind eye to the criminal elements.
Our guest today is Joshua Philipp. He is one of the best reporters in the world on his subject matter. He's an investigative reporter for the Epoch Times, and we have actually the great privilege to have him answering some questions about a part of the world many of us don't know about. You're listening to China Uber Alice. Larry in La Selva Beach is our next caller. Larry, you're on with Joshua and the rest of us here.
Hi, Joshua. I'm so happy to hear you talking about this topic today. I pay attention to the news quite intensely, and I remember this summer there was a report about Hunter Biden doing a business trip to China, and in this business trip, he made a deal with a conglomeration to buy a American company that specialized in making sound deadening equipment. Now, I was wondering, and he got $40 million to conclude this deal. I was wondering, why would they be interested in this? But then I remember that submarines use sound deadening paint on it to help them to hide in the ocean. And I was wondering if you knew anything about this. And if it's true, it seems to me like great treason against our country.
Yeah, so that would be part of the whole China 2025, China 2035 definition. And I can approach this from 2 points. So basically, the CCP has an economic theft program to catch up fast and surpass the West. It used to be called Project 863. They renamed it to China 2025, updated now China 2035. And basically, it identifies several key areas. New energy, so on, AI, supercomputers, this stuff, that would fall under the definition of new materials. And yes, a lot of these do have direct overlap with military applications. And so a lot of it talk about dual use technologies, things you could use both for computers and smartphones and businesses, as well as military use. And when you're dealing with the Chinese Communist Party, there's no such thing as a company that's totally independent of it in China. And any technology that the military there sees as being beneficial to it, yes, they do get their hands on it. To the point of business deals, that's standard operation when you're dealing with Chinese subversion. Sometimes people are aware they're doing it, sometimes they're not aware they're doing it. But the CCP, again, I mentioned the United Front Work Department. They have a branch of their government that does operations like that full time. This is, the guys wake up 9 to 5 and they're focused on making deals exactly like that, and they do them every single day with the elite of not just the United States, but of every country. If you're a politician, if you're a journalist, if you're in academia, if you work in think tanks, anything of influence, you are going to be approached by these individuals, and they're going to offer you honey traps, business deals, exchange programs, you name it. And all of it is targeted at not just gaining control of your influence, but also of using that as different ways to push the interests of the Chinese Communist Party, in this case, China 2035.
So this is the same basic theory you were talking about earlier in the last hour about how they go in and help countries build bridges and do certain things and get them into debt, and then and now they're under the thumb.
Exactly. And actually this ties into the last question we had about the cartels and drug trade as well, because the way these operations work is they, again, run under the United Front Work Department. The United Front Work Department goes to what are called the Tongs, Chinese fraternal or hometown organizations, which kind of function as the unofficial governing bodies of overseas Chinese communities. Not all of them are under the CCP. There are some good ones as well. But these are organizations with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of members in every key element of a society. Oil workers' tongs, academics' tongs, police tongs, government tongs, you name it.
Akin to a union?
Akin to unions, but much, much significantly broader. Every element of society is going to have a tong tied to it. When the CCP gains control of these, which is one of the main focuses of the United Front, they gain control of the whole network. And they can use it for influence operations or otherwise. But it's important to note that underneath a lot of the tongs are the Chinese street gangs. And the relation between the legitimate society, the business side of it, and the street gang side of it is what constitutes the Chinese mafia, or the triads. As one example, in New York, one of the main organizations I was exposing quite a bit was the Fujian American Association, one of the main organizations tied to the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, and one of the main targets of the United Front. Underneath the Fujian American Association is the Fuqing Gang. And this is one of the top 10 biggest mafias in the world. These are human traffickers, drug traffickers, you name it. They were involved in a really infamous, I should say, human trafficking operation called the Golden Venture, where you had this human trafficking ship run aground off the coast of New York, and a lot of people died in the frozen waters.
Wow. Larry, thank you for the call. We appreciate it. We have a full board here, so we're going to move on. Can I ask you, before we go to the next call, let me ask you the obvious question that I think the three of us are asking ourselves quietly amongst ourselves here. All this investigative reporting you've done, you're still here.
I'm surprised too,
I mean, I hate to ask the obvious question, but some of the reporting you've done, on the tongs and the CCP and some other things you've been reporting on for the newspaper you work for, it seems to me it might be a hazardous gig.
Do you have a bodyguard?
I get asked this quite a bit. Between 2008 and about 2012, the way I started as an investigative reporter was actually on accident, when I accidentally uncovered this whole network and began exposing it. And during that time, I was doing a lot of on-the-ground investigations in Chinatown in New York and Flushing, Queens, which is one of the main Chinese communities out there. In fact, a lot of the original government reports on the U.S. side, on the United Front, heavily cited my articles. During that time, I was getting death threats regularly, like really often.
Wow.
And not like online stuff, like people coming up to me and surrounding me and, saying they're going to kill me and stuff like that. And, I'm just used to it by now. Let's just put it that way.
Wow, that's just, wow. I hope at some point you don't get used to it anymore. My God, that's... Anyway, Joshua, we're going to take another call from Al in downtown Santa Cruz. Al, you're on with Joshua Phillips.
Hi, Joshua Phillips. Really nice to speak with you. I wanted to compliment your Crossroads production. All the graphics and your delivery are just excellent, as well as printed publications. And I was wondering, even though you're not the circulation editor or whatever, is Epoch Times kind of growing in terms of their circulation and exposure?
We are still, based on the data we can get, it seems, the fastest growing newspaper in the United States. And yes, we're still growing quite fast despite all the different types of censorship we're facing, and which is, if we weren't being censored, we'd probably be we are one of the biggest, but we'd be much further along with being the biggest had we not been censored on just about every front.
Well, you know, everything I see from you guys is excellent. Not only the content, but the way in which it's produced. Your graphics and print and everything is just really great. But you know, one of the things I'm always curious about is, are you doing anything that is oriented towards younger people, especially in the U.S.? You know, for example, Amy tells these wonderful stories, and you know, I'm 62 years old, but I can remember as a child reading certain books about people who had escaped from behind the Iron Curtain, and some of it was written towards youth. And I think that sort of thing could be really productive in the form of maybe graphic novels or comic books or something like that. And because that next generation seems to be so ignorant about some of the dangers of communism.
I fully agreed. And you know, what we find is a different demographics and different kind of age groups. They like different platforms, and so print media tends to be like, you know, older folks, usually 65-ish and above. We do have podcasts. My show is also a podcast that tends to be younger. YouTube is a bit mixed. I typically have viewership across the whole board, you know, and so on, right? Every platform has its demographic. In terms of stuff like graphic novels, I mean, I don't think we have anything like that, but I definitely consider doing it. That's actually a great idea.
Yeah, I hope you would follow up in that way, you know, in some way, and you know, maybe pass that idea on and speak with, like Amy, people who have personal experience. She's a very good storyteller in terms of how she relays her own experience, and some of that stuff, I start to see it actually in my mind's eye as good graphic material or whatever for children especially. And
you should have seen both Non and Amy's face light up when you kicked that idea out there, because they must have been thinking about it ahead of time.
Well, I've been bugging them about it. I've called 2 or 3 times.
Excellent idea. I think really for the next generation, for the younger people.
Yeah. The only other thing I was going to ask you about was, is much being done in terms of like having a podcast with China Über Alles? You know, it doesn't have to be that clean a production because, you know, you've got these calls that are coming on, but I'm hoping that it's getting a wider listening audience.
Let me answer that. I'm told by our web guy, Jonty, and by MZ that is, in fact, in the works. I don't know how far along it is, and I don't know what the exact plan is, but I do know the podcast thing is in the works. And of course, along those lines, you can listen to any one of our programs that we've already produced on zbsradio.com or on our China Über Alles website itself.
Yeah, and so the final thing I could say, you know, even though your specific focus is often on, you know, communist Chinese politics and issues, you guys are so superior to the likes of CNN or even some of the other alphabet stations. I feel like I'm being spoken to in an intelligent and respectful manner and actually, you know, learning something instead of like smelling constant lies or distortions, you know.
Well, you know, the best way to get I think Joshua will back me up on this. You know, before I ever got into doing radio talk shows, I was a news guy. That's what I did here at KSCO many years ago. And look, my philosophy, and I think Josh is the same way, you do the best job you can to get the information out there, and you let the public decide.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just I've seen so many good things fail because they weren't promoted enough, and bad things succeed because they put more of their budget into promotion, and it's very frustrating. Anyway, just compliments to all of you guys.
Thank you for the call, Al. We appreciate it. We've got another call. Let's see. Helen is calling us from Santa Cruz. If I push the right button in the right place, Helen should be on KSCO. Hi,
Hello.
Helen.
Hi. On Big Picture Science, a couple of weeks ago, they mentioned that there's a stretch of Neanderthal DNA that some people have on chromosome 3 and then others don't. Well, the people who have that are susceptible to getting very sick from the COVID-19 virus. If you have this stretch of Neanderthal DNA on your chromosome 3, you can get very sick from the COVID-19. Otherwise, you don't get that sick from it. Now, the Europeans and the Southeast Asians, we are about 60% of us have this stretch of DNA. But guess how many the Chinese have? 0%. The Chinese are not susceptible to getting as sick from the apparently from this, if this is true, the Chinese don't get as sick from the COVID-19 because they have 0% of this particular stretch of Neanderthal DNA. So that's kind of suspicious in a way, isn't it? So you tell me that the Taiwanese and aren't very susceptible. They only have 10 cases of it, and I don't think the South Koreans have much either. The Taiwanese may not be very susceptible to that. They haven't done anything special. They just aren't very susceptible. They're old and all that, but they're not susceptible. So that's possible if this is true.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with any of the data on this, but it does sound interesting. And yeah, it would be suspicious. You know, the China they do collect DNA data on Americans. Mm-hmm. In fact, now it's come out that the COVID tests that they've been collecting DNA and working partly with groups tied to the CCP with that, which is concerning. And yeah, everyone talks about biowarfare, but every country has biowarfare programs.
That's right.
They frame them as defensive. But part of that is targeting viruses at specific DNA strands. And, there are differences between countries and cultures and regions based on your DNA. And that is part of how they do it. But, I mean, I haven't seen the data on this, so I can only say so much, but it is interesting.
No.
Helen, we appreciate the call. I'm going to look that up, by the way.
Okay.
Thanks for calling.
Do investigate that. Okay, bye.
Well, that's an interesting. I had not heard that. But well, because Helen brought it up, let's talk to you about it, Joshua. The whole idea that the origin of the COVID-19 virus may have come from a weapons lab. There's, of course, the Chinese version that it was transferred from animals, I guess bats is what they said. And, of course, the World Health Organization backed China's idea about it coming from, as an investigative reporter, have you looked into this at all?
Yeah, so last year I did a documentary, it was called Investigating the Origins of the Wuhan Coronavirus. And it was when the whole thing was first coming out, and we were hearing claims from every direction, and there was no clear answers on it. And what we did with that documentary is looked into the available evidence and just reported what we found. We didn't really draw any hard conclusions on that documentary, but I think the evidence showed pretty strongly that the narrative it came from the Huanan seafood market, that wet market, was not true. And all the evidence did point to a lab leak origin. We also go into the possibilities of, gain-of-function research where they were altering these viruses to make them more able to infect human lungs and so on. We go into all their research as well, and using their own words, using their own publicly reported experiments. Based on my understanding, what I've researched, I personally believe it was a natural virus from the horseshoe bat, which they had at that laboratory. It seems that videos coming out showing poor practice of security dealing with bats. Scientists getting bitten by bats and so on. And reports they had talking about this, that there was cross infection at some point, and it got out through that. Personally, I think that was the case. But right now the WHO did conduct its investigation, and it's being questioned by just about everybody, because they didn't research even the possibility of a lab leak. The data was handed to them by the Communist Party. The WHO did not do its own independent investigation. The CCP gave them the data. They also had CCP agents monitoring the team the entire time, and it turns out some of the people who were sent over, even from the WHO side, already had deep ties to the CCP, including somewhat to the Chinese military. And, all the king's horses and all the king's men trying to prove it didn't come from a lab, and they couldn't do it. So what does that tell you, right?
Yeah, it's a little scary. When the report first came out, I heard the same report that you did that the lab hygienic practice in that particular lab was a little less than stellar, is the best way I can describe it. And it just scared the heck out of me, because this is a lab that's doing research on viruses and immunology and stuff like that. And apparently the hygienic practices weren't all that slick. It's kind of scary.
It's terrifying. I mean, no matter what country you're in, keep in mind the type of research they were doing at this laboratory. Of course, you could say they're trying to create cures or possible cures for future mutations of viruses. They were doing gain-of-function research, which is, even the U.S. had cut off types of research like this. It's where you take viruses and you alter them in ways to be more deadly to humans. They were taking natural viruses and doing gain-of-function research to alter them to make them more deadly for humans. And then it comes out that they weren't even wearing proper gear. They're handling bats with their bare hands. They're not wearing proper equipment when they're doing it. People are getting bit by bats. They're proud of it. They're writing, doing Chinese media broadcasts on it like it's a big deal. Like they're proud about it. And they're writing publicly about the type of research they're doing. And yeah, somehow the world didn't really seem to care about that until very recently. Yeah.
So, Josh, I heard that lots of people, I have some friends already living in China. Actually, people living in China, they not really believe it's from the bat or this kind of thing. They don't, but they cannot say because they're afraid of it. And so what's the update to the, you just mentioned that they collecting recently, CCP collecting the information U.S. citizen, people living here, they had the COVID and the information. So what the purpose of that?
Well, this is one of the big concerns that a lot of people, I think, in the defense community had. Remember, going back last year, it wasn't really reported on that heavy. But one of the things that came out, there were military reports, there were academic reports talking about CCP's collecting of biometric data, which includes DNA data. Part of this ties into their social monitoring systems. That was one of the big concerns people in Hong Kong had when the CCP began doing the nasal swabs and so on, testing people for the virus. They believed that China was collecting DNA data on them. They use this for social monitoring. They can use it for bioweapons. They can use it for all kinds of things. They do this, for example, to Muslim Uyghurs, where they take DNA swabs of them as part of their social control programs. So this is not unheard of for the CCP. But one of the big things that happened last year that almost no one talked about was that it turned out that these DNA tests people do for like ancestry type websites.
I was going to bring that up.
Yeah.
A lot of those are processing your data in Chinese labs, which was why last year the U.S. military actually banned U.S. military personnel from taking those tests because the data was being sent to China, which does suggest that they viewed it as a national security threat.
And also, doesn't that bring to question, Joshua, the whole result of, okay, you go to Ancestry.com or 123, whichever one you use, and you send it off, does that not, the result that comes back, doesn't it not put the result that comes back to you and that information in question because it was processed in China?
Yeah, well, and to be clear, I can't remember off the top of my head which companies specifically processed the data in China, but I do remember it was most of them. And so I don't want to call out specific companies. I can't remember specifically which ones did it off the top of my head, but it does call into question the results of that research as well. Yes.
Yeah.
So those companies still is not on the list, entity list and blacklist or whatever you call it. I mean, to have some kind of censor and regulations. They collaborate with CCP, provide the data or something.
Well, remember, I think
nobody talk about that. Maybe
exactly.
Josh knows.
Josh was the first person I thought about that. The thought crossed my mind when the caller asked the question. Now Joshua's confirmed it. We've been talking about a lot of scary stuff in this program. Joshua, that's pretty scary to me.
Yeah, well, it is scary, and they have talked publicly about things like this around the use of bioweapons. Now, China is a signatory in the bioweapons agreement, where they did agree to not create bioweapons. But the problem you have is if you actually read the research on it and the concerns from the U.S. side on it, China never, after signing that document, they never showed any signs of getting rid of their programs. They never even acknowledged the programs, the bioweapons programs that we knew they had. Mm-hmm. And so not only did they never show any signs of dismantling things or changing things, they even never even acknowledged the programs we knew for a fact that they had going on. But at the same time, as I mentioned, every country does biowarfare programs, right. But they call them defensive. And a lot of it's dual use. A lot of it's dual use where laboratories exactly like the ones we've been talking about, the Chinese Institute of Virology, they do research on viruses that could very easily be used for military purposes, because what you're doing is you're taking existing diseases or viruses and you're altering them to be able to infect, say, certain DNA strands or infect human cells more easily, like the gain-of-function research they were doing with the horseshoe bat virus, which a lot of people are pointing to as the possible origins of the virus we're looking at now. But, who knows? The problem is the CCP is not letting in any kind of researchers into these labs, and our ability to get information out of them is limited to what they've been exposing publicly, which, funny enough, is actually quite a bit. But there's probably a lot we don't know also.
Josh, now let's go back to the Hong Kong topic. It seems like from the last hour of our discussion now, Chinese government, after they took over control of Hong Kong and took back Hong Kong in 1997, what they first did was make a wave of influence economically, right? A lot of economic interest going there from mainland China to Hong Kong. And after they done all these influence from economy and finance, so on and so forth, then gradually they come into their influence on the government of Hong Kong, and then the media. And then they gradually will kick out all the people that actually speak the truth about. Now, comparing with what happened in Hong Kong, with what happened in the Western world, especially here in the United States after China joined WTO, I thought that they were doing very similar steps. I mean, here in the United States, as well as in the Western world, they come in with a lot of money doing the investment, and then the influence to the media, to our business world, to our politicians, and pretty much now, and of course the campers, school campers.
Go ahead and ask the question.
So what do you think? This is a kind of a.
Does it sound familiar?
Is that a typical strategy?
They use the same basic strategy everywhere they go. One of the more significant videos that came over the past year was this individual, a Dr. Di Dongsheng, who came out, and he's part of Xi Jinping's brain trust. He's one of the main advisors to Xi Jinping, the head of the CCP. He comes out and he gives a speech basically celebrating the success of the CCP, and he announces and declares that the CCP is able to control American politicians through their control of Wall Street. He was saying they control America through controlling Wall Street. And yeah, it all overlaps. You talk about the military. They have what they call the three warfares doctrine, which works on psychological warfare, media warfare, and legal warfare. Controlling the media, controlling narratives for them is a military operation. Before, they had a political warfare department, the General Political Department, which carried out political warfare, things that we were accusing Russia of doing. The CCP has an entire military branch focused on. That's now under a different branch because they reformatted everything. It's the Strategic Support Force that does that now. When you talk about manipulation of finances, in their unrestricted warfare doctrine, they were open about this. There's currency warfare, manipulation of currencies. There's transaction warfare, manipulating of platforms like PayPal or, Alibaba / Amazon or manipulating, for example, they have economic warfare, which plays on GDP. They have business warfare, which focuses on individual companies, and then cyber warfare, which feeds all of this, which, again, was a military operation. Remember, under Obama, Unit 61398 of the General Staff Department, 3rd Department, those were military hackers. The 3rd Department was their signals intelligence department, kind of like the Chinese NSA. They were doing this as a full-time job. And they reorganize it as well. A lot of sort of strategic support force now. When it comes to the bigger picture of it, the big thing now, which maybe ties into Hong Kong and ties into Taiwan, is that the CCP doesn't need this anymore, because their new focus is this new digital currency, the digital yuan. And as soon as they release this, which they're already doing, they just partnered with the SWIFT payment system, and they're right now creating the global standards for every centralized bank to do the same. They call them CBDCs, centralized bank digital currencies. This is a way. It's a currency controlled by the government, in this case, the People's Bank of China, which the CCP can monitor, and every single purchase can be approved or denied by the authorities. It's tied to the social credit system, which monitors every citizen and gives you a citizen score. And they can restrict you from buying anything, travel, luxury goods, maybe even food, house, anything. And this is a program that they're exporting. Even the Federal Reserve now is looking into doing similar things. As soon as the CCP does this, that is the end of U.S. sanctions.
Yeah.
Up until now, they've been doing currency manipulation and stuff like that. As soon as they do this, none of that matters anymore, because they dominate. Yeah.
Joshua, we're running out of time. In this 2-hour period, we've been talking with you and asking you many questions. Is there something we did not ask you about the region that you want to get out there?
Well, I can tell you the two next things on the horizon, other than, of course, the issue of Taiwan and possible war with China, to defend Taiwan. The two big things they're doing right now is digital currency, and they're promoting this as the global system for it. If that happens, this means that the CCP's system of social control becomes the way of doing things in every part of the world if we're not careful. And it also means that we're going to have a system of currency where every transaction can be monitored or canceled based on private industry, centralized banks, or whatever, using the CCP's standard under the CBDC program. The other big thing they're doing is promoting what they call state capitalism. And you can even see a lot of mainstream news outlets using that catchphrase now. This is the mixed model economy, as they call it, that the CCP is promoting right now as a way of bouncing back economically from the virus. And what does it mean? It means state capitalism. The state controls the capitalist systems, socialism, essentially, or even more extreme, closer to outright communism. The state controls the capitalist systems, and they call it mixed model economy, where the government partly owns every business in the country. That is the program they're going to start promoting globally.
Okay, Josh, we are towards the end of our program. It's been a great pleasure having you on our program. We're looking forward in the future to have you back and talk to our audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. You got to come back, talk about the digital. That's important, digital money.
Yeah, it'd be my pleasure. Thank you for having me as well.
All right. You take care of yourself, okay?
Thank you. Yeah.
Your brand of reporting is scary. Take care of yourself.
Thank you.
Bye now. This is China Uber. Alice will take our final commercial break and be back to wrap our show up. Fresh, prepared twice daily grab-and-go sushi you'll find waiting for you at Sushi Market Sprouts, 2 blocks from the beach at 300 7th Avenue in Santa Cruz. Fresh, delicious, and oh so good.
Hello, I'm Junko, and I look forward to serving you at the Sushi Market Sprouts.
On the lot at Watsonville Ford. Hello folks, Michael Olson here with Melvin Cooper, the new owner of Watsonville Ford. Melvin, when the Franish family owned this Ford dealership, it was the pride of the community. But then an out-of-towner took ownership, and well, we all know what happens when there's no gardener in the garden. Are you going to turn this Ford store around like you did Chevrolet of Watsonville?
For those of the community that don't know, Rocky Franich sold the dealership to an out-of-towner approximately 5 years ago now. And so we recently took over the dealership and are really working hard on bringing in the processes that have made us so successful at our Chevrolet store. We have wonderful people here. We brought some of the Franich employees back with us, and we're just building something really special here. We're really excited.
Chevrolet, Ford, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram. Find the best cars and trucks America has to offer at Melvin Cooper's hands-on, no-pressure dealership group on Watsonville's Auto Row.
Ed Doyle Eco Painting has been proudly serving the Santa Cruz County area for over 30 years. Commercial and residential, exterior and interior. From everything to drywall repairs and color work, we do it all. Choose local for all your paint work needs. And now offering fire protection with fire retardant painting. 831-325-9810 for a free consultation. 831-325-9810. Ed Doyle Eco Painting.
I'm Jim Chubb with Pacific Inland. Our NMLS 361091. If you're interested in buying or refinancing, I suggest you take advantage of my reliable expert advice. I'm at 818-7700. I help you make informed mortgage choices with zero selling. See my Sunday column in the Sentinel. We have a 30-year fixed at 3.375 APR with no closing costs. Some restrictions apply. Call me, 818-7700 for individual pricing. That's 818-7700.
Chef Ben here from the Back Nine Grill and Bar at the Pasatiempo exit, sharing with you our family meal. A full rack of ribs, a whole smoked chicken, a pound of pulled pork, and plenty of barbecue sauce, served with a full quart of baked beans, coleslaw, macaroni and cheese, dinner rolls, onions, and pickles, including dessert, homemade brownies, and a pint of Marianne's vanilla bean ice cream. Feeds 4 to 6 hungry people, ready in 15 minutes. See you at the 9.
Asked what kind of family she wanted. She said, a family like yours.
Learn more about adopting a teen at adoptuskids.org. You can't imagine the reward. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Well, that's about it for our program for today. We want to thank all of you for listening. I was telling Amy and Nan, it was so nice to have everybody in the studio today. What a great guest. You booked a really good guest. He's a great reporter.
Yes, again, our special guest today was a senior investigative reporter and the host of the program Crossroad on YouTube, and we had a good time, and we're looking forward to have next program with you next Thursday.
Yes. This is AM 1080 KSCO Santa Cruz. We want to remind folks that you can find out all of our show information on our website, ChinaUberAlice.com, or if you want to hear other recordings of the program, you